Imagine going from 0 to a million. Sounds pretty amazing, right? Let's face it, we all want to grow our wealth and everyone's hunting for the quickest way to make their money work harder, not just faster. Well, there's a strategy that's been around forever, and it's called compound interest. It's the secret sauce that wealthy people have mastered, and guess what? You can too. In this video, I'm breaking down how compound interest really works and how you can use it to turn small savings into big gains. Let's dive in and see how you can turn pennies into millions.
Einstein said that compounding was the eighth wonder of the world. And it is. So we all learn about interest rates and growth of things over time and different things like that. But I think that it is a huge advantage if you can understand the power of compounding and if you can do a bunch of math related to compounding in your head.
Now, if you're one of those people who have heard of compound interest but still think, that's not for me, I don't have time, or I don't have enough money to make it work, keep watching. This video will change how you think about your financial future. Keep watching and find out how the power of compounding interest can turn $24 into $12 trillion.
I'll take one example from a letter Warren Buffett wrote to his investors in the 1950s. I think it was like 58 or 59. And he said that the American Indians who were based in Manhattan, what was Manhattan in New York, in 1626, it's rumored that they sold the island of Manhattan to the Dutch for $24.
Let's start with a famous anecdote from Warren Buffett, a man whose name is synonymous with wealth. In the 1950s, he mentioned a deal where the island of Manhattan was sold by Native Americans to the Dutch for just $24 back in 1626. At first glance, this seems like a steal for the Dutch, right? $24 for an entire island in today's New York City? But what if that $24 had been invested at an annual return of 7% instead? Through the magic of compounding, that $24 over nearly 400 years would have grown into a staggering $12 trillion. This is the sheer power of compounding interest. It's not just about how much you start with, but how much time you give it to grow.
We have something known as the rule of 72. If I have a 7% interest rate, I can take 72 divided by 7. It's approximately 10, which says that in 10 years, at a 7% interest rate, the money would double.
A key tool for understanding compounding is something called the rule of 72. It's a simple way to estimate how long it will take for an investment to double based on the interest rate you're getting. Rather than getting lost in complicated formulas, the rule of 72 allows you to estimate with surprising accuracy. Here's how it works. You take the number 72 and divide it by your annual interest rate. The result tells you roughly how many years it will take for your investment to double. For example, if your investments are growing at 6% per year, it will take about 12 years for your money to double. 72 divided by 6 equals 12. But let's break this down further. Think of compounding like planting a tree. In the beginning, the seed is small. You water it and wait. Year after year it grows, slowly at first. But over time, it gains momentum. Eventually, that tiny sapling becomes a towering tree, producing shade and fruit year after year. Compounding interest works in a similar way. The earlier you plant the seed, or make the investment, the more time it has to grow and, more importantly, multiply. If $24 had been invested nearly 400 years ago, it could have grown into an astonishing $12 trillion today through the power of compound interest. The key to this incredible growth is compounding, where interest is added to the principal amount over time, allowing each future interest calculation to be based on a larger sum. Using the formula for compound interest, we can calculate the rate that would produce this result over 4 centuries. In this case, the final amount, $12 trillion, is the result of an initial investment of $24 compounded over 400 years. Dividing $12 trillion by the 24 starting amount gives a value of $5 trillion, representing how many times the investment multiplied over the years. Taking the 400th root of $5 trillion gives us a growth factor of approximately 1.0724, meaning the investment grew by about 7.24% each year. Plugging this rate back into the formula confirms that $24, compounded at 7.24% annually for 400 years, would indeed grow to $12 trillion. This example vividly illustrates how even small investments can turn into massive sums over long periods, thanks to the remarkable effect of compound interest. The true secret of compounding lies in its exponential nature. In the beginning, the growth seems slow. People often lose patience during this stage, thinking their money isn't working fast enough. But give it time. Soon enough, the doubling periods become shorter, and your investment starts growing at a speed that seems almost magical. This is where most people misunderstand or underestimate the power of compounding. They focus on the early, slow growth and give up too soon.
So how do we get $24 to become 12 trillion? So let's break that apart. There are two factors that lead to the 12 trillion. The first factor is the length of time. Okay, length of time is a very important variable in how much your money grows. And the second factor is the rate at which it grows. And what we found is that even at not a very high rate, 7% is actually below the S&P has done, you get some astounding results. Recently, I don't know whether you saw in the news, there was some older gentleman who passed away. He was a librarian, and when he passed away, he gave the college where he worked $4 million. And everyone was surprised that this guy, who was middle class, ordinary guy, had actually got $4 million saved up.
Most people think compounding interest doesn't work fast enough to be useful. You might hear someone say, "I'm already 50 years old. It's too late for me to start now." But here's the thing. It's never too late. The key is sticking to the plan and not getting discouraged by the slow early growth. If you start investing in your 20s, your money has decades to grow and double. But even if you're in your 50s, compounding can still work for you. You won't see the same results as someone who started earlier, but you can still achieve significant growth by the time you retire. Plus, every little bit helps. Take the example of the librarian from New England, mentioned in recent news. He lived a humble life on a modest salary. Yet, when he passed away, he donated millions of dollars to the college he worked for. How did this happen? He simply invested wisely and let compounding do its work. No fancy strategies, no high-risk investments, just time and patience.
So the librarian is not making 15,000. He's got a white-collar job. He's probably making somewhere less than 100 and maybe more than 40 or 50,000, somewhere in that range. And he paid attention when they were talking about compounding in math class, and if he makes 4 times what the guy with the minimum wage makes without doing anything esoteric, he ends up with a very significant net worth.
One of the biggest mistakes people make is not sticking with it. They see their investments growing slowly, and they either pull their money out too soon or stop contributing altogether. The key with compounding is time. It takes years to fully reap its benefits. Compounding isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a methodical, long-term approach to building wealth. Many people also think saving money in a traditional bank account is enough, but here's the problem: inflation. Let's say you've been saving diligently for years and your money is just sitting there, earning minimal interest in a bank account. Meanwhile, inflation is quietly eating away at the purchasing power of that money. $1 today won't buy the same goods or services in 10 or 20 years.
The question is, why doesn't everyone end up wealthy when we retire? Because there's not much required to become wealthy. You just have to follow a certain game plan and you'll be there. And in fact, at the age of 68, the guy was making less than 50,000. He could start withdrawing 50,000 or more per year from that account and would outlast the rest of his life because he'd have a 5% withdrawal rate and he's got a 7% earnings rate. So the money would actually keep growing. He'd probably end up making a $4 million donation to another school or something.
Let's address a common myth. If I'm already 50 or older, compounding won't work for me. This simply isn't true. Yes, starting earlier gives you more time for your investments to grow, but even if you begin later in life, you can still benefit from compounding. Consider this: if you start investing in your 50s, you may have 20 or 30 years left before you need to withdraw that money. That's still enough time for compounding to work in your favor. By making smart investment choices and sticking with it, you can grow your wealth significantly, even if you didn't start as early as you'd have liked.
So compounding is a very important element, no matter what your profession, calling in life ends up being. It's very important to have the fluency in math, very important to understand the concept of a runway and the length, time it takes to double, and compounding rate. And don't take the retirement account or 401k or IRA, pull out the money and go on vacation. Time value destruction of that is huge.
Compounding interest is one of the most powerful tools available for building wealth. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about playing the long game. Whether you're just starting out in your 20s or thinking about your financial future later in life, it's never too late to put compounding to work. Don't be discouraged by the early slow growth. Stick to the plan and let compounding do its magic. In the end, whether you're looking to retire comfortably, leave a legacy for your family, or achieve long-term financial freedom, compounding is a strategy you can't afford to overlook. If you're ready to start compounding, now's the time to act. Remember, the earlier you start, the bigger the impact. Your future self will thank you.